answer. Does anybody iron their clothes here? Oh, good. Excellent. Awesome. So we have two kinds of irons here. We have these guys, which are the industrial irons. I guess only two of them are surviving right now. They're around $700 or $800 a piece, and they're designed to be on all day long. And they rest face down in these little holders. They don't sit up. They're supposed to be face down. And they're on these trays, which are metal. Obviously, that's conductive, and so the tray can get hot. So we also put a silicone pad down to keep it from getting, so that you don't touch it and burn yourself. These are what we call gravity feed irons. So up here, they have water and a tube that goes down into the iron, and that way you can get, usually, steam out. Doesn't seem to be working right now. The stuff in the bottom is sort of like a filtration stuff, purification, so we don't have to use a special kind of water. So it's not dirt or rust or mold or anything. It's actually supposed to be there. These little silicone tubes, it looks dry. Oh, maybe this isn't on. Maybe it was leaking and that's why it's not on. Yeah, there it goes. So we'll see. If there's water all over the place, we know that. And sometimes it does leak because, like I said, these are silicone tubes. That's very hot. The hot, yeah, there we go. The hot plate of the iron will touch the tube will melt, and the water will leak everywhere. And these tubes start out pretty long, and then they start getting shorter and shorter because we cut them and reattach and cut and reattach until it's useless. We also put a special plate on the front of it because, again, they're $700, $800 irons. And these two actually, students, one day somebody came to Sunny and I and said that they had a bunch of scholarships, scholarship money, and could we identify students in the fashion department who met certain criteria, but were not privy to some of the information they wanted to know about. So we just listed pretty much all of our students and gave it to her, and she went through and checked because she had more access than we do, and a bunch of our students got surprise scholarships they weren't expecting, and they were so thrilled that they pulled their money and each donated a little bit and bought these irons because they were so sick of the ones that we get from the thrift store when these break. So these were donated by students. And so they got the new silicone pads, they got the new tubing, they got these things, because one of the things that annoys advanced students is when somebody irons something they shouldn't or on too high of a setting, and then it melts onto the face of the iron and either gets junk all over your stuff or ruins the face of the iron. So they put these, at least we can replace these. Like I said, we also have regular home irons. These are not as consistent. They're all a little bit different. Some of them have auto shut off, and for some of them you turn a knob, or sometimes you have to unplug and replug. These do sit upright, so because they're sitting upright, be careful, because that hot thing is out facing you. If you don't know if it's hot or not, what I would recommend you do is you take the iron and you put it on the ironing board, and then feel if that's hot. Don't touch it. So just try ironing, and then you can see if the place you just ironed is hot, then it's working. We also have up there on the wall some industrial iron rules. There's a heat setting on here. It should be in the medium to low setting. We try to keep them, it says number 6. We try not to turn them above 3 because they can melt your stuff. At the beginning of class, when you come in, you heard me probably, if you were here early, telling them, plug them in. If you want to use them, plug them in. When you guys get here, go ahead and plug in the irons. And when we leave, we need to unplug them. Let's see, what's today, Monday? Yeah, there's no other class after us, so we have to unplug them. And when you plug them in, they're going to be in the off position probably. So you plug it in, and then you also have to remember to turn it on. Otherwise, you plug it in, and then you go do your thing, and then you come back to iron, and it's still not hot, and you're cussing. And I think that's most of it. Oh, it says please do not drop the irons. I think that goes without saying, right? That would be bad. And then there's a water level on these gravity feed irons. If you notice that the water is at or near or below even that level. There's, see that glass pitcher by the sink? There's also a coffee pot on a shelf inside that other closet. That's what we use to refill these. So you just fill the water in the sink. Like I said, this makes it so that we don't have to use any special water. So we can just use the tap water and we can refill it. And they're for you to use, so go ahead and refill them, take care of them, because when they're out, you're put out. So, okay, so now that we know about the irons, oh, a few other things actually. These tables, so there's a corkboard here that's covered with muslin and probably some padding, just to make the space for ironing larger, because right now we have like 36 by 45 inch wide rectangles that we need to press, and the regular shape of the ironing board is not as convenient for that sort of a job as these giant boards are. With that being said, they're a little unstable, so be careful where you press. Especially later, I'm going to tell you how to put fusible interfacing on your fabric. You're going to want to, like, as you're applying pressure, you want to be careful not to tip it, because that could be a problem. But underneath this, we have the industrial ironing boards. Usually every year students replace these too, because obviously they get nasty. When you're standing here, you'll see all these little dots. That's fusible interfacing that shouldn't have touched the ironing board, but it did, and then it melted to the ironing board, and that's why it gets all gross. It's a bunch of glue basically. But these have like a little shelf underneath to catch extra fabric, because these are designed for ironing large things. So there's a little shelf under here that students made a little catch basin for their fabric. And there's also a motor. Well, not on this one, but on that one. There's a motor and a pedal and a plug. And if you plug it in, when you step on the little pedal, the motor will activate like a vacuum, and it'll suck the fabric down and suck some of the heat through. So it's to help make the ironing process more efficient. So we have that. You're welcome to use it. That's why we have them. And then usually, like I said, you saw all the glue on the ironing board, and I talked about how things melt here, especially when you get to the fusible interfacing. That happens. To prevent that, no matter what, you should always use what we call a press cloth in between the iron and your fabric. So that could be like a paper towel from over there by the sink, or a scrap piece of muslin, just something that's clean, and you put it in between your iron and your fabric, and that should prevent whatever's on the iron from getting on your fabric in case something happens. Stuff happens. So the press cloth, again, is you always want to have it in between your fabric and the iron. And sometimes when you're pressing things, you need a little extra steam to make it work, like depending on what kind of fusible interfacing you have, sometimes it requires steam. And a good thing to do is to use your press cloth damp, and then that serves even better sometimes than the steam that comes out of the iron. Also for steam, because these aren't always so great with the steam, we have these bottles located here and there, so you can spray your fabric and then iron it. When we go to work with, why am I talking about ironing? When we go to work with fabric, we need it to be really flat and pressed taut, because if I went to cut a shape out of something that was wrinkled like this, it wouldn't be the shape that I cut, it would be some other shape. So we need to make sure that our fabric is pressed. Also, you need to be careful when you're pressing muslin. Each class has sort of a different set of rules, but when you press muslin with steam, it will probably shrink. Most fabric will. So when you're pressing with steam, make sure, like, before you sew, press and steam it if that's going to be your MO. Because if you then sew a seam, and after the seam is sewn, the garment is cut, the seam is sewn, then you use steam to press your seams, because that's part of the process. You sew, press, and you use steam on your seams, that garment is going to shrink, and it's not going to be the same size as when you cut it. Often what we do when we're doing one-off stuff like we are here, is we wash the fabric and dry it the way we're going to care for the garment. So washer and dryer, if you're going to wash and dry your tote bag. That way it'll shrink before we start sewing it. But this is just a square toe bend, so we'll be okay. But I would recommend, because you guys probably have, like I was showing you, the fabric comes on those skeins and it's folded in half for a really long time and compressed under a bunch of other skeins of fabric. So that fold in the middle is pretty in there. So you'll probably want to come and just iron the snot out of your fabric and get it nice and flat. And then after you iron it, don't like gather it up over your arm and wrinkle it back up again. Pull it off the ironing board very carefully, you know, so you might want to, yours is not going to be this big, but you might want to grab it and kind of, not doing a good job, and kind of hold it, you know, something like that, so you're not really creasing it, and kind of rest it gently on whatever table you're gonna use after this. Okay, so today the first thing we're gonna have to iron is a little bit of muslin. So I would recommend that you iron it and steam it and get it nice and flat. I'll do that real quick. I do not have a press cloth. That's very bad. I'm living on the edge, but I'm not getting graded. So I'm going to press this and steam it and get it really nice and flat. Now, what we're doing today, we need the length, or I should say the width of your muslin from selvage to selvage. So that's probably in the neighborhood of 40 to 60 inches. And we need about a half a yard down the selvage edge. So we need about, what is that? A half a yard, 18 inches. So we need a strip like that of muslin pressed really nice. And then I'm going to show you what to do with it next. So we'll just get some of these wrinkles out. I think I can live with that for now. All right, so let's go head back over to the table here real quick. So you don't need to iron all of your muslin today, but you need a little strip.